Welcome to the Mike and JD Show YouTube channel. Thank you for being here. I want you to do me a big favor before you check out this clip. I want you to hit the like button. I want you to throw in a comment and make sure you're a subscriber to this channel. And then I want you to share this video with your friends. Help us defeat the algorithm. And then if you like this content and you appreciate this content, please head over to patreon.com/The Mike and JD Show and support the show. That is how we actually get funded to be able to do this. So we thank you very much for being here. And now enjoy the clip.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you work your A game. A made no rain from the track when we unite and spit. This is an A game, better bring your A game. Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you work your A game. A made no rain from the track.
Hey, and then JD's back says, how fitting is it the week Ole died this week? It's on Sting week. Yes, absolutely. Ole, who booked the absolute dirt worst feud angle for Sting in the history of his career. I would say even worse than like some of the TNA stuff was the Black Scorpion angle that was booked by Ole. Was absolutely tanked his career for a little bit, and that's a shame. But yeah, rest in peace, Ole Anderson. I know over on the flagship they did what would you say, more like 90 minutes over on the flagship about Ole.
About 90 minutes.
Yeah. So I'm not going to give like a complete synopsis of his career, but I've been actually watching a lot of Ole lately because just randomly I found this 1982 Mid-Atlantic YouTube playlist. Like they just have a random play, and I think they're just like stealing content from WWE and they're just getting away with it. So kudos to you guys. So they're uploading it, and I started watching it, and like they're in a feud right now. Like Ole Anderson and his tag team partner Stan Hansen are on there, and they're feuding with guys like Ray Stevens and the Boogie Woogie Man and all these other dudes in Mid-Atlantic at the time. And it's like, damn, Ole can promo his ass off, and him and Stan were a hell of a tag team.
Well, I mean, Ole was. I think Ole Anderson. We have a tendency to talk about his attitude and his outstanding booking ideas, but he was. I think a lot of people would be surprised at how good a worker he was to begin with, and as a promo, he was tremendous. He really, really was tremendous. He was the heat magnet. The promo he cut after turning on Dusty, right? The big Dusty Ole feud, right? That was the thing that just ignited this entire feud. He was a tremendous promo, and he was a strong worker. I think a lot of people would be surprised at how good he was, especially for the time.
And I think his reputation kind of clouds just kind of how really great he was. And like a lot of people, pro wrestling just ended up passing him by. By the time 1990 rolls around and WCW hires him as the booker, he'd kind of lost his fastball there, and he probably very much wanted to get out of pro wrestling at that point anyway, but it was kind of a job to him. But he was around for a long time. He was a big time wrestler out of Minnesota for a long time, trained with Vern Gagne. He went over. I know he was the booker for Georgia. He booked Mid-Atlantic, and he obviously booked WCW. But he had some really, really great years in Mid-Atlantic and in Georgia as like their top booker. And he ran like two of the top territories at the same time for a lot of his career. And so he does really get. I think he doesn't get a ton of credit for that because I think his attitude and his failures are kind of like have outweighed his successes in a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, I mean, you can go back and read some stories. He was observably a racist. On top of it all, there's a lot of stuff that you can attribute to Ole that sort of tempers whatever excitement you might feel about the entirety of his work. But coupled with the stories that you hear about how much of just a bad attitude he had, just about how just a nasty, grumpy, cranky old man. But then again, this, it's pro wrestling in the 80s, right? He was, he was there for Black Saturday, right? When the Briscoes and the other guy, was Jim it Barnett? Yeah. When they in the cover of the night sold GCW, not that GCW, Georgia Championship Wrestling, to Vince McMahon without him knowing. You can understand maybe how he was a little, might be a little cranky, might be a little off-putting when, he does, even his business partners, he can't trust them, right? I'm not trying to defend the guy by any means, but, just trying to paint a picture as to why maybe he was like this. There's definitely examples you can point to.
Well, he probably got screwed over by a lot of people. So, it's a carny con man business made up of people kind of trying to screw each other over and get a leg up on their competition at all times. And he was obviously caught up in that. If you guys do get an opportunity, go check out the Lapsed Fans Black Saturday series. And they do a really good job of breaking that entire thing down. You get kind of a complete picture of just who Ole Anderson is, because they pull out his book and they read excerpts from the book, and he talks a lot about his successes and his failures, and of course he doesn't take any accountability for the failures. If right now he's probably up, he got to the pearly gates and cuts a promo in St. Peter, he gets into heaven and says this place is the shit, he's like one of those guys.
Why isn't Flair here?
Yeah, he's probably like still saying, look, I told everybody Flair sucked, he never was a draw. Hogan sucked, he could never draw. I remember, and I want to pull this up. I think this absolutely encapsulates a lot of Ole Anderson's character, and he really reminds me of my grandpa. And funny thing is, they're like the same age too. And they're both gone, God rest their souls. But so I did a screen recording thing of Ole on arguing with Dave Meltzer. It's one of the greatest things. If you just Google Ole Anderson argues with Dave Meltzer, you'll see the clips pop up. But I wanted to play this little quick clip right here, which very much like tells you exactly who Ole Anderson is. It's hilarious.
Well,
so I mean, if there were 1,000 of them,
have to disagree about everything, because there's more Hulk Hogans out there than you can possibly imagine, but nobody's looking for them.
How come nobody can find them?
Who's looking for them?
Well, I think that everyone in wrestling should be looking for them, because God knows they need to make new stars. We all know that.
I got rid of Hulk Hogan.
I know you did, which is an interesting.
Well, if you think he was so good, I guess you must think I'm the dumbest guy in the world to get rid of him.
I didn't say that.
I think the story is that they had him on. Dave had him on. He was supposed to sell some books, right? I think he was out there to promote his book, but he didn't even talk about his book. He just spent his time arguing with Dave.
Yeah, because he thought he was going to go on there and own Dave. And, like, depending on who you talk to, like, people that don't like Dave will say, oh, yeah, Ole absolutely owned Dave. But then when you actually hear it, it's like, in no way did that ever happen, in fact. And right there, that clip just showed you. And I know this is like a kind of an out-of-context 26-second clip, so you can go check it out for yourself. But very much, I thought Dave held his own in that argument. And him saying, well, I didn't say that. Like, that was Dave's way of saying, yeah, you are an idiot because you thought that Hulk Hogan could not draw. And so the point that Ole was trying to make was that Hogan couldn't draw in his territory because he was too big, and he wouldn't be able to draw in the same towns every single night. But he had to go to WWE, and he had to go to Vern with these big territories and these big cities to where they didn't see him every week, so he would draw better. But he was like, well, outside of Vince and outside of Vern, he never drew. And then Dave had the argument, was like, well, actually, he drew in WCW too. He's like, oh, he did? I didn't know that. So that just tells you exactly who Ole Anderson is. But one of my favorite stories, and if you guys ever do get a chance, check out the Death of the Territories book too. I think that's a great read for all you wrestling historians out there. If you have not read that book, you need to go out of your way to check it out. But the scene in the early 80s when they're at the NWA convention, and Ole essentially is challenging Vince McMahon. He like stands up and like starts screaming and cussing at Vince. And in my head, like, I want JD to write the book, or I want JD to write like the television series. Like that's like the beginning of a television show like this big war between Ole Anderson and Vince McMahon, like the North versus the South, and Vince like this Northern like mobster type guy, and like Ole's like this Southern hillbilly, even though he's from Minnesota, but like in my head, that's like how you would do the series, and they're kind of fighting over these two big wrestling territories and trying to grow their business. I think that's great, and I think Ole's last interaction with Vince McMahon, I think will garner him a lot of respect, considering what we know about Vince now and what a lot of us have known. So here's a clip from like a shoot interview that Ole said, his own unique way of greeting Vince and Linda McMahon.
The same fucking thing. He came back a couple of weeks after that. No, it was the third week he came back. That's what it was. And he said, I got my wife with me. I'd like you to say hello to Linda, I think her name was. I said, fuck her and fuck you.
So that's Ole
So
Anderson in a nutshell. What a hero.
That's so good. And you I don't have anything to add really. Like that's pretty much it. But you did talk about the Tim Hornbaker book, right?
Yeah.
Death of the Territories, you said, for wrestling historians. I think this is required reading for any modern wrestling fan who just you just need to understand where all this stuff comes from. When Triple H says that WWE, brought wrestling out of the smoky bars and whatnot. No. There's stuff that every wrestling fan should understand. It's a tremendous book. It's a great read. And it's a great historical perspective on how wrestling existed and how it thrived, and ultimately how WWE did more harm than good. So it's really required reading, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. Everybody go check that book out. We got some more sad news. Our man Virgil, Soul Train Mike Jones, he died. Was it yes? I think it was yesterday. Yeah, he died. I think he passed away yesterday. And he, as a kid, he was a big star to me as like the $1 Million Man's kind of his servant deal. And then I thought the big turn that he did against $1 Million Man was pretty cool. He never really did much after that. I know he was in the NWO for a while. Everything about him was kind of like just petty spoofs, as Dave was talking about on Wrestling Observer Radio. But I think he'll always be remembered, not only for his run with the $1 Million Man, but for him kind of being like a modern Carney, just setting up shop anywhere there might be wrestling fans, and selling autographs. And to that, I say respect to you, sir, and rest in peace, Mike Jones, aka Virgil.
You got to respect the hustle. Yeah, I mean, listen, this is a guy, you don't want to speak ill of the dead, but facts are facts. No. He was not a good pro wrestler. No. But the role that he had, like, me and myself as a kid, I don't know what our age gap is between the two of us, but it's the same thing. Virgil, when the turn happened on Ted DiBiase, it was the biggest thing in the company. Like this, he immediately became red hot. This is something that had been simmering practically from the moment he was introduced. And when it finally happened, I mean, you still have you still have those feelings imprinted in you. It's like, from the day Virgil decided to move on, and he was a big deal for a while, very short while, but eventually, he shows up, in the Royal Rumble because they need 30 guys, and that's pretty much it. And he does the jump to WCW, becomes Vincent, and that was not a mistake. I don't know if I don't know if everyone knows the story, but they'd called him Virgil, or Vince had called him Virgil in WWE because that's Dusty's real name. His name was Virgil. So then when he shipped over to WWE to WCW, started calling him Vincent. So ribs upon ribs.
Good for him getting a job just to pull a rib on Vince McMahon. He probably got paid like $6 figures a year. Just because Hogan and Bischoff were being petty, and I think that's tremendous.
But he came in he came in to be the job guy, right? Because when you think about the guys who were in there at the time, you had the original three, like Nash and Hogan. They're not jobbing to just about anyone. They had Sean Waltman in there at the time too, right? DiBiase was there. The Giant too, right? All guys that, well, maybe, but Waltman was the NWO cruiserweight guy, right?
Yeah.
All guys that didn't necessarily want to be taking falls. Their names, they're stars. They've got their egos. So, it's the continuation. It's the logical continuation of the Virgil bodyguard thing where he just takes the bumps for the stars. That's all he needed to do. That was his role, and good for him.
Yeah, good for him. He parlayed that into a lot of paydays like the rest of his life. I actually he was
on a lot of pay-per-views, man. He was on a lot of pay-per-views.
Yeah, he was. He was around for, and if you think about it, he was in WWF at their peak, right before the Attitude Era. So like the pre-Attitude Era peak, talking like late 80s, early 90s. I think they kind of finished him off like with that Yokozuna angle where Yokozuna murdered him, and like he was like telling Brett, stay away from that man, Brett. Like I remember that angle like it was yesterday.
All right. Okay, yeah, I remember that now. Okay.
Like then he was in the peak WCW. Yeah. So he was in like two different like very successful eras, and he not really like a top character, but he was like a character in two major eras. Now I did get a chance to meet Virgil. He came to Japan, I want to say in 2006 when I was stationed there, and on a USO tour. So they actually had like a wrestling show on the base there at Yokota Air Base, Japan. Him, Disco Inferno, and Screamin' Norman Smiley himself, Black Magic. But he was like full like Screamin' Norman gimmick, because he hadn't went to go be a trainer in WWE yet. So they all came out, and I just remember like they had like the picture line where they had like photos made up, and they didn't charge anything because it was all military. So like the USO took care of everything. So everybody got a picture with a wrestler. You got like they had like a photo with all of the wrestlers' pictures on it, and then the wrestlers would just sign by their headshot, right? That was on like the one photo that you would get. Okay. So I remember he was like first in line, and I was a heavy drinker back then, and I had like a yard of beer, right? It's like a 3-foot tall like beer glass, right? And it was just like filled with beer, and it was like wrapped around my neck. I had like a lanyard, and I remember going up to him, and he's like, hey sir, would you mind putting that beer down? I don't want to be photographed with people drinking. And I was just like, this is Virgil, right? In my head, I was like, yes, sir. So I hand my beer to my friend, and I actually take the picture, and he couldn't have been a nicer guy. And then I go down the line, and like Norman Smiley signing, and like they had some indie guys who I didn't know who they were. I don't think they ever made it. Like they were signing stuff. And I get down to the end of the line at Disco, and he's just like reading a magazine. He looks up at me. He's like, hey man. And then just signs it. And then he's like, next. And I was like, he was such a dick to me. I was like, what the hell? But Virgil, like of all people, was like the nicest guy in that whole line. I thought he was fantastic.